And you're the COO? We're live.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Ross. I'm the Director of Clinical Services at thedoctor.com. And Dr. Tom and Marzi called me about an hour and a half ago and said that a huge storm was coming into Costa Rica. And if they weren't here at 4 o'clock, it was because they didn't have Wi Fi. So he asked if I could fill in. And I was happy to do so when I heard that the topic was purity coffee and that I was going to get to talk to Andrew Salisbury of Purity Coffee. And I was just asking you this before we went live. You're the owner,
The founder, yeah.
the founder.
Founders. That's right.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about all things coffee. And I just want to give this disclaimer at the beginning that if you know that you, for some reason, shouldn't be drinking coffee, then just follow that. Okay. If for some reason your adrenals are not supporting coffee drinking right now, or if you know that you have one of the genetics, CYP1A, that makes you a slow metabolizer, then it might not be ideal for you. There's definitive research that coffee is one of those foods that it can either be one person's medicine or another person's poison. And there's research that shows that people who have the fast metabolizing gene, that it actually has so many health benefits. So if you're a coffee drinker, we want to make sure you're drinking the best coffee available. And so, in all of my research, I have found Purity Coffee to be by far the best of what's available on the market. It's what I drink myself when I drink coffee, and it's delicious. So, sometimes things that are maybe healthier aren't always the tastiest, but I found this to be a beautiful combination of delicious coffee and also knowing that I'm not getting any of the toxic side effects of mold or mycotoxins in my coffee. And it's organic, certified organic, which is great. So, Andrew, how long have you owned this company, or how long ago did you found it?
We started just about 5 years ago, and 2 years in research and development, and then we launched about 3 years ago to the general public. Sold our first bag of coffee 3 years ago. So a very new company.
Fairly new. And how is your coffee different?
Wow, it's we approach this from a different perspective than I think any other coffee company. This all started originally because my wife was having some health issues and she was drinking lots of coffee. And I started researching the health benefits of coffee, expecting to find that it was actually bad for her and that she should cut down on her coffee intake. And then when I found out about all the health benefits of coffee, I started digging a little deeper, and I looked at what are the compounds that could be causing these health benefits, and what would happen if we made every decision based on health. So as far as I know, we're the only coffee company that makes every decision based on health without compromise. So that's the first step. So there's a long list of what that looks like when you make every decision based on health. But that's the first sort of lens that we look through when making every decision. So I think that's probably the starting point of what makes us different.
That's exceptional because it's maybe not always financially. Most companies are out to, for the bottom line, right? So it's really, that's what I found when I met your team at conferences and learned more about your company. To really put health first is not common and makes me really grateful.
Thank you. It really is a business of passion. I mean, for the first 2 years, we had no idea whether there was going to be a business at the end of this because there was just so many unknowns as we started this. I mean, the first unknown was if coffee is so healthy, could we have any impact on making it healthier? I mean, could we do any difference to the coffee by putting in all of these practices? And if we could do any difference to the coffee, would we be able to measure it and prove it? And would our customers buy coffee based on health? So it took us a couple of years before we had our first bag of coffee, and it was really sort of build it and they will come sort of thing. It was probably one of the worst ways to start a business. I wouldn't be following that as a good idea as how to start a business, but it turned out well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, it's always your booth at any of the conference is always like way out into the aisle, like 4 people deep. So everyone's trying to get their healthy coffee and find out more about it. Mold is something that, as a practitioner in the trenches, we're seeing a lot of yeast showing up on stool test, and mold and mycotoxin exposure, and we're testing for that. And so it's really so wonderful to be able to have an option for somebody, because they're having to make so many changes to heal, right? And then to pull out coffee when it's not, necessary, except for the fact that they're drinking mold in so many cases, right? To be able to have this option is really nice. So how do you test for mycotoxins?
Well, we use an independent lab. In fact, we use 3 independent labs for the testing that we do for the different compounds that we have. But the most important thing about mold is you've got to make sure it never starts in the first place. I mean, there's lots of things that happen on the farm and in production that you can do to avoid mold ever developing in the first place. So that's the first step. And then you have to test for it. And there's I think around 80 different forms of mold and mycotoxins that we test for, but it's
Wow.
pretty thorough. But we test all the green beans. So, the first thing we do is we lab test about 40 to 50 organic specialty grade beans from around the world for the ones that are highest in antioxidants, and then make sure that they're free of pesticide residue and mold. And as long as they're free of those things and very high in antioxidants, they go on the table for us to start evaluating the different compounds. But so that's the starting point. I mean, they don't get past the door if they have any molds. So
Okay, great. So you're very connected with the sourcing of the coffee
absolutely.
beans.
Absolutely. And more so recently, I mean, one of the things that, we can talk about the things that make it the difference when you're looking for coffee based on health. One of the things that we discovered is that the soil conditions in the farm and the type of farm that the coffee comes from makes a big difference in the health benefits of the coffee. And that's not how we started. The way we started is we lab tested coffees from all around the world, and we picked the ones in highest in antioxidants. But what we started to discover is that the ones that were highest in antioxidants tended to have the best farming practices in terms of regenerative agriculture, great soil conditions. They were shaded coffee plants, hand-picked, hand-selected. So having a real sort of in-depth knowledge of where the coffee comes from actually makes a big difference in the selection now.
Yeah, I remember when Dr. Tom many years ago told me that um, coffee ended up being one of the first genetically modified plants, in that it should be grown in shade. And they just cleared forest and planted coffee. So the sun was blasting it, and it was actually turning the oils rancid in the coffee. And that's what many of the coffee that is commercially available is coffee that's not grown in shade and is actually rancid.
It's one of the challenges, and the yields in the farm, if it's industrial farming. So if you go to an industrial farm with coffee, you'll see rows and rows of coffee trees perfectly lined up, almost like a winery. And a tractor will go between all of the different trees and just rake the trees, and that's how they pick the cherries. The problem we've got is that the yield is actually higher in industrial farming. So when they use fertilizers and they use pesticides and they don't have any shade, the berries become bigger, so the yield is bigger, people make more money. But what we found out is the nutrients in the coffee are not as rich. So it's one of these things where economically farmers are sort of incented to do industrial farming. But if you care about health, you need to move away from industrial farming and have regenerative farming with the coffee.
Yeah. And not only coffee, but many other food sources, but definitely coffee for sure. So I'm just going to welcome some of the people that are here. Barbie's here, and she says that she is a Purity Coffee subscriber. So she said, "Let coffee be thy medicine," which is, I have the t-shirt that says, "Purity Coffee, let coffee be thy medicine." So it's a great little play on that quote. And Dorota says, "I'm looking at the website and see that you only offer whole coffee beans. Is it possible to have it ground before shipping? And why don't you offer the ground?"
We
There's a
get
good
that.
reason.
Yeah, we get that request a lot. And the reason we don't is one of the first things we decided in the beginning with this is that we weren't going to compromise. We would make every decision based on health, regardless of cost, regardless of taste, and regardless of convenience. And we feel like our tribe will find us. The people who really care about health first will find us. Well, the problem with grinding coffee is that it stales very quickly. So if you take a whole bean coffee, it's fresh for about 15 to 21 days maximum after roasting. If you grind the coffee, it's sort of like an avocado or an apple. It starts to oxidize very quickly. So what you're seeing is the coffee is going to start to stale. You won't notice it, but you're losing a lot of the antioxidants. So we can do all these things right. We can pick the beans that are highest in antioxidants, the very best quality. We can roast it to maximize the antioxidants. But if we give you ground coffee, the moment you open the bag, that first pot is going to be fantastic. Subsequent pots are going to have lower levels of antioxidants. So, we try and encourage people by giving grinders on our site for new customers and give them information on how to do it themselves. But, it's one of these things where we felt like we just couldn't compromise on something like that. And it causes people to ask the question that you just, asked.
Right. And thank you for that travel grinder. It's so handy because it's lightweight. And I used to travel with like a regular coffee grinder and it took up a lot of room in the suitcase. So this is nice to have. But yes, I appreciate that you put so much care. And that's why I feel it's one of the reasons why Purity always tastes so amazing because I'm
Yeah.
forced to grind it fresh,
Yeah.
which is a benefit to making a delicious cup.
Yeah, and you probably feel it in your body as well. I mean, there really
Yeah.
is a difference. If you can just, have a normal cup of coffee and then grind a cup of coffee with Purity Fresh, you'll notice a difference in the way that you feel and the energy level and clarity, which is, important.
Yes, I had a delicious iced coffee cup this morning and didn't feel any of the negative effects of coffee, just enjoyed every sip.
Great.
So, yes, thank you for that. Lisa says, is coffee not acidic? And I'm going to take this. So, Lisa, for some people um, that have GI issues, sometimes I say coffee is like pouring battery acid down. And um, there are people that tend to be a little bit more acidic. So there's also people that are eating robust amounts of vegetables and plant-based foods, and their body is in an alkaline state. So having a slightly mildly, and it's much Purity coffee is much less acidic than most coffee, my understanding. And so for them, there's so many more health benefits that this slight little bit of acidity is not going to negatively impact on their health. But if you tend to be more acidic, if you're having health issues, I noticed you say you have rheumatoid arthritis and you're having a flare. I don't know if it's okay for you right now, right? I would have to know more health history for you. But usually if somebody's in the midst of a flare or having some health issue, I say err on the side of caution. But so we don't know. It could be perfectly fine for you and it might not be okay for you, but I'd have to know more about your health history. You want to add to that, Andrew?
I just say anecdotally over the years, what we've seen is that a lot of people have asked us for a low acid coffee, and we actually haven't done anything with the acidity of the coffee. It's pretty much the same level of acidity as most coffees are. But what people have noticed is that their sensitivity is not actually to the pH, but is actually to sensitivity to pesticide residues, to mold, to mycotoxins, and that sort of thing. So I would test it. I would just make sure that it really is a sensitivity to the acidity rather than a sensitivity to all the other things that are found in poor quality coffees. Worth trying.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's people just say they don't have any of the negative side effects after drinking Purity. They don't have that crash. They don't have the jittery feeling. So, yeah, I agree. If coffee is safe for you, I say try Purity because it's going to be a dramatically different experience from anything else that you've tried. Sherry says, is this coffee tested for mycotoxins? And you said it was 80, how many mycotoxins?
I think, now I'm not sure if I'm conflating mold with mycotoxins, but there's the mold test we do is for at least 80 different forms of mold and levels of mycotoxins. I don't know how many of each.
Okay. So it's kind of all grouped together
Yeah.
for sure.
And
And
heavy
then,
metals and that sort of thing.
pardon?
Heavy metals, copper, that sort of thing, and all the other sort of contaminants that can get in coffee through poor production practices as well.
Ah, so you test for all of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how do they process the coffee after it's picked to keep the mycotoxins low? Do
You
they
mean
put it in raised beds or how do they dry it? Isn't
the,
mycotoxins a lot of it because they put it out on tarps and it like molds?
the problem is that the way that the coffee is processed, it's such a long question, but I'll try to do my best to tell you the sort of like the main
Okay.
part. So mold can develop in lots of different stages of the way that coffee is produced. The most common way that mold develops is when they process the beans, and this is the worst way. When they process the beans and you have green beans and they're dried and they're fully processed and they don't have any mold on them, what they'll do in the farm is they'll spray down these mountains of coffee with water. And they'll do that because what that does is actually adds weight to the coffee. So it's a commodity. And given the fact that you make your money based on the weight of the coffee, if you spray it down, then it weighs a little bit more, maybe 10% more. So they go right up to the limit of what they're allowed because they test the humidity. Then they ship that for a couple of months and you've got a coffee that is just getting moldy as it travels to you. So there's lots of ways mold can develop. Mold can develop when through the picking process. So one of the problems with industrial farming is when they pick all of these coffee cherries at the same time, some are underripe, some are overripe, and some are just ripe. And the problem with picking them all at the same time is when you get an overripe cherry, it's sort of like taking a moldy strawberry and throwing in a vat of strawberries that isn't moldy. You'll come back the next day and the mold will be all over the strawberries. Exactly the same thing with coffee. So you can't ever let mold develop at any stage of the process because mold then turns to mycotoxins. So mycotoxins are a derivative of the mold.
Okay, fascinating. That was new concepts for me. So thank you. And then the pesticides. Do you know on average how many pesticides are normally used with coffee? It's a lot, right?
This is really honestly, I mean, like, if there's one thing I would tell people, your starting point has to be organic. I mean, it's just a starting point. I mean, they have this sort of dirty dozen with foods that apparently are meant to absorb pesticides like strawberries and grapes. But if you look at a coffee cherry, it's very much like a grape. I mean, it's you can crush it with your thumb and forefinger, and inside is the cherry. And so what happens is coffee is the most heavily treated crop on the planet, and it's treated in countries that don't have the same level of oversight that you do in the US. So endosulfin and glyphosate and the sort of chemicals that really should never be put on food, in my opinion,
I
used
agree.
for coffee. And so, you're taking a product, you're soaking it in pesticides. It's the most heavily treated crop on the planet next to tobacco and cotton. And then you're grinding it up and you're putting it in your coffee. I mean, you're putting it in your hot water in it. I mean, it's a starting point that everybody who's serious about health needs to have. It's a surprise to me that people who make the decision to go organic with 95% of their fruits and vegetables and that sort of thing miss out on coffee as something that they should care about. So.
Right. It's just so essential. I
And
agree.
the load has gone up a lot. I mean, over the last sort of 15, 20 years, and it's very hard to get these statistics, but we know the amount of herbicides and pesticides that are used on coffee has gone up exponentially because it's just, it's the yields are bigger, unfortunately, and it's a commodity. So money follows management. So that's people will do what's going to give them the results.
Right. We're seeing such high levels of glyphosate in people's urine. And when you really dig into the research about that, I mean, it's in breast milk and have been going down the rabbit hole of toxins lately. And just like, it's really no question to err on the side of organic.
Yeah.
To lower our dose because it's all around us. All around us. Okay, next question is from Christine, and she wants to know how to store coffee. Should it be stored in the fridge, freezer, airtight container? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so freshness is super important with the coffee. We nitrogen flush our bags so that they're fresh until you open the bag. But once you open the bag, it starts to stale. So light and moisture are the enemy of coffee. So you want to put it in an airtight container in a dark place. Don't store it in the fridge, although there's a body of coffee specialists now who are actually freezing coffee because they feel like it actually provides a sort of like a cleaner taste to the coffee. It doesn't degrade the coffee in any way, but you have to freeze it in an airtight bag. So one of these sort of vacuum sealed bags takes out the air, put it in the freezer. That works very well. Or do like me, consume the bag within the first 15 days or a week and you're fine.
Right. Same here. I don't have to worry too much about that. I just put it in the stainless steel airtight container, and
That's it.
it's by the time I get through it, it's still nice and fresh, which is great.
Yeah.
So Barbie's suggestion is to try drinking it black, to not add sugars or other additives. And, that can be great for some people, other people. I mean, there's a lot of great alternatives now if somebody doesn't handle dairy, to do dairy-free additives. My favorite sweetener to add is glycine.
Okay.
Have you ever?
I've never tried that. I'll have to try that. Glycine.
Yeah, so you can get glycine powder. There's quite a few brands that have it, but glycine is a single amino acid, and it's one of the nutrients that's needed to make glutathione in our body, and glutathione is the most important antioxidant. There's also some research that shows that glycine helps to block the receptor of glyphosate, and it's a natural sweetener.
Really?
And it doesn't impact on blood sugar. So just adding like a half teaspoon can just create that sweetness that's sometimes nice to have when people haven't quite transitioned to black coffee. I like black coffee as well, but sometimes I just think I'm going to add my glycine here because this is a great way to enjoy the sweetness of it as well as the health benefits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And truthfully, a lot of people, when they turn up the nose to black coffee, is because the quality of coffee they're drinking really isn't that great. I mean, unless you're drinking really good quality fresh coffee, black coffee is horrible. But if you're drinking great quality coffee, I mean, you don't want to put any milk in it or sugars in it. It's just, but you do need to start with a great quality coffee.
Yeah, I completely enjoy Purity Coffee Black, no problem. So Barbie uses Laird's coconut creamer, and I know there's quite a few. Good. I'm laughing at the next question. There's quite a few good creamers, but read the ingredients because there's sneaky little ingredients that they add to some of these on the market. And you can also make your own nut milk, and it's pretty easy to do. It's about a cup of nuts soaked overnight, homemade macadamia nut milk in Purity Coffee is delicious, but it's 1 cup of macadamia nuts soaked overnight, raw macadamia nuts, organic. And then the next morning you rinse them really well, drain them, put it in with 3 cups of water. You can throw a date in, a little bit of salt, a little bit of vanilla, blend it in a high-speed blender and run it through a nut milk bag. It's so creamy. It's really great. So we can make things at home for less expensive without all of those preservatives that allow it to sit on the shelf or stay in our fridge for a month.
Great. I'm going to give that a go.
Yeah, you'll have to try it.
Yeah.
So Scott says, is there a healthier version of cocaine? And not that I know of.
I work in Latin America, but I'm not an expert in that area.
Yeah. And then he also asked, is coffee bad for fatty liver? And
you're the expert, but I would say this. One of the people who's on our advisory board is Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, and he was the last dean of admissions for Harvard Medical School, and he's a liver surgeon. And the reason he's so passionate about coffee and health is he says in 35 years of being a liver surgeon, he's never seen anybody with end-stage liver disease who drinks between 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day. He says they don't exist. If they're coffee drinkers, they don't see him with major liver problems. So I mean, and this is one of the most renowned doctors and surgeons, liver surgeons in the US. It's one of these areas that most people are not aware of. That coffee has a huge health benefit to reduction of fatty liver, and also liver cirrhosis and end-stage liver disease, liver cancers. So,
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for that, for sharing that,
yeah.
because that's a great testimonial. So he's not even adding any caveats of what people are adding to their coffee. He's just straight saying if they're drinking coffee in any form,
Yeah.
he's not seeing them in his practice.
See, this is really where we think it's so interesting, is that all of these studies, and there's been 19,000 studies done on coffee and health. These studies have been done on a wide range of coffees from different countries and different cultures, from instant coffee to very high-end specialty coffee. And the studies show that coffee has huge health benefits in terms of reduction of type 2 diabetes, liver, heart disease, these sort of things. And that's without any attention being paid to the quality of the coffee. So one of the things that we're most excited about is as you start really paying attention to the quality of the coffee, and we know that we measurably have the absence of bad stuff and the presence of more good stuff, we believe that we're going to be able to show that coffee can be even better for you. And it's already a pretty good starting point.
Yeah, that's great. And you have it in decaf as well. So tell us a little bit about why your decaf is different than many of the commercial decafs.
Well, it took us a while to dial in the right decaf, and there's 4 different processes that you can choose for decaffeination. The first 2 use chemicals. The last 2 is Swiss water and critical CO2, which is only done in Germany. And so we tested both of them to see which one leached the most antioxidants, and we had 0 loss in the antioxidants in Swiss water, which is a natural process which takes the decaffeination, or takes the caffeine through an activated charcoal filter, and that basically removes the caffeine and then reintroduces the other compounds into the coffee. So we found it's the highest quality way for us to do it, and you know, that's what we stuck with. So.
And are there high polyphenols as well in coffee? I was just creating a polyphenol document, or is it more phytonutrients?
Yeah, a lot of polyphenols. I mean, you know, it's one of the richest sources of polyphenols in the American diet. I mean, it really is, and that's what Adriana Ferrar, who's also on our advisory board, is a professor at the University of Brazil, and she's written probably three of the 4 most definitive textbooks on coffee and health. And her perspective is the polyphenol contents and the antioxidants in the coffee, the chlorogenic acids, trigonylene, and these sort of compounds that actually cause the health benefits. It's not the caffeine. You know, and that's been proven again and again when studies have been set aside against decaf and then caffeinated coffee. People are seeing the same results in terms of prevention of type 2 diabetes and liver disease. So caffeine isn't the compound that causes it, but polyphenols are they're a huge driver.
Yeah, and polyphenols, for those of you who aren't familiar, actually feed the beneficial flora in the gut. So it improves your microbiome. So how great is that? Enjoying a cup of coffee while you're feeding the good bugs in your gut. So pretty exciting. Yeah, it's up there with chocolate, right? Isn't chocolate in the...
Yeah, if you look at the ORAC scale in terms of the highest antioxidant foods, there's very few foods that you consume on a daily basis that are high in the ORAC scale. But one of them is dark chocolate or cacao, and then the next down from that, only a few places down, is coffee. But that's just general standard coffee. It wasn't coffee that they tried to maximize the antioxidants in the coffee. We would do a lot better than, you know, the regular ORAC scale. But yeah, chocolate's very good for you. But that it brings me to that point that, you know, if you're doing something every single day, it's a very high leverage point. And so that's why I think, you know, chocolate is something you can do every day, and coffee you can do every day. You know, there's other things that are very high in antioxidants like peppermints and other spices that they may be very high in antioxidants, but you're not going to get a lot of them in terms of quantity. But coffee, we can drink a lot.
Yes, every day. And when you're not experiencing the negative side effects from it, it just makes it so much more enjoyable, for sure. But yeah, those spices that you mentioned, we really should be throwing them around on our food like confetti. But most of us, it's easy to get up. And I've heard so many people say, I literally, the thing that gets me out of bed is my cup of coffee, right? And I don't ever hear that about spices.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, people just really love their coffee. And so it's not fun for me as a practitioner to recommend that they remove it, right? Because for some people, it's just brings them so much joy in life. And I think we really have to weigh out for any food the joy benefit versus the harmful benefit. But just to know that there's, if you can just go straight for the joy without any of the harm with
Yeah.
purity coffee is a real gift.
And all coffees are not created equal, and you can find other coffees apart from pure coffee that are fantastic and doing a great job. But it is worth paying attention to it because it's something you do every single day in most cases, and there's only some small adjustments that you can get. You can get 50% of the way there by getting really good quality, freshly roasted organic coffee, tested for mold and pesticide residue. They're the two, that's the sort of basic starting point. And, whatever coffee is your preference, whatever coffee you enjoy, just ask the coffee company to provide you a certification that it's gone through that testing, and then you can drink, the coffee sort of guilt-free.
Mm-hmm. But there's not a lot of them out there that are organic. And that's because there's an added fee, right? We should just have food in the grocery store should be organic, and anything that's not organic, they should have all the pesticides labeled. But not everybody agrees with me on that. That's my philosophy. When you go into the produce section, there should just be the food, right? And then the pesticide section. But I know, like, from other companies in this space, they have not invested in that organic certification because it's expensive, right? To certify the farms and to have them qualify.
Yep, and the farmers aren't necessarily encouraged to do it because the problem is people aren't buying coffee yet based on health concerns, or they're not buying coffee based on health. And because they're not buying coffee based on health, the farmers are not creating coffee that is better for your health. So they don't get that much of a premium for organic coffee versus coffee where they get a higher yield using pesticides. So it takes a lot of searching to find the real artisans, the people who really care about the quality of their product and are producing great coffee without pesticides. The financial incentive is actually going in reverse. It's incenting people to use pesticides and to actually cut corners when it comes to coffee production, specifically when it comes to health, because since that's not a criteria, then it's a corner they can cut and feel like that they're not going to have any sort of payback.
Right. Well, we're preaching to the choir right now. This
Yeah.
group that's listening to us, they
Yeah.
are passionate about their health. So yeah, I love the people that are on the doctor.com Facebook lives. They're just beautiful humans, and they're just all so passionate about finding any little tips and tricks, right, that can improve quality of life. And I love that Dr. Tom brought you on, and that he brings on people to share this kind of really important information.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Mike says, can you discuss the pros of coffee versus tea? So I'm guessing he's mentioning like green tea, because that also has known health benefits.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. This is an argument I have with, well, not an argument, a conversation I have with Sanjeev all the time, Sanjeev Chopra, about this, because he says, a lot of his Indian doctor friends are always asking him about tea. And he says, well, there's just not as many studies on the health benefits of tea as there is on coffee. I mean, it's just the amount of studies that are done on coffee dwarf those of tea. But his argument is the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So he's saying, look, even though there's not a lot of evidence that tea is as good for you as coffee, we don't have evidence that it's bad for you. We don't have evidence that it's good for you, but it's likely to be good for you, but it's not as likely to be good for you as coffee. And the reason for that is the polyphenols. That's the main driver. What most people don't realize is coffee has 7 times the antioxidants of green tea, which is for most people shocking, because green tea has done such a good job marketing themselves as a health beverage, and coffee has done such an awful job of marketing themselves as a health beverage. When it comes to antioxidants, there's more antioxidants in coffee than in green tea.
Yeah, I do remember when I was just creating this document of research on the top 100 polyphenols, green tea and black tea were way at the bottom of that 100 list. So that's a really great thing to point out.
Yeah, yeah.
And Tyler says, how much coffee is too much? Super personalized, right?
It's really interesting. There was a study done about 8 to 10 years ago. It was in Stanford University, and they decided they want to go and find out exactly the answer to that question. And they tested people who were fast metabolizers of caffeine, slow metabolizers of caffeine, and it was a really interesting study. But to cut a long story short, the conclusion was trust your body. I mean, it really said, it's just, there's no definitive, because people are different. What you have to do is you have to pay attention to your body, see how you feel on it. I'm a fast metabolizer of caffeine. It goes through my system quickly. I can drink a double espresso and go to sleep at night. It just doesn't bother me. Other people can have one at midday and it'll keep them up all night. You just really have to pay attention to your body, but also pay attention to the quality of the coffee, because a lot of the side effects that people think are coming from coffee are side effects that are really from impurities in the coffee. And you might find that if you have a really good quality coffee for health, you don't have any of those side effects and you can drink more coffee.
I completely agree. Yeah, such a good point. Dr. Tom often says body language doesn't lie. And so we use that a lot when I'm doing a test interp with somebody and they say, oh, I feel terrible when I ate eggs, but eggs didn't show positive on my test. So I guess it's okay for me to eat them. And I'm like, no, wait.
Yeah.
If your body's saying that this is not ideal for you, you have to listen to that. So we always have to weigh that balance. And that's the beautiful thing with coffee. It often people feel the symptoms. So if they drink it at dinner time and they stay up all night, then don't drink coffee at dinner time. Keep it before noon, right? You got to find the sweet spot. Each person has to find their sweet spot with this, but also try a coffee like Purity and just see if you react differently.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. And Karen says, will I experience a headache when skipping Purity for a few days after having had it for a month straight?
It's actually a challenge we give to people. What we like them to do is drink our coffee for 3 days and then go back to the coffee that they normally drink and see how they feel. That's a little bit cheating, because they're going to feel bad when they go to another coffee, but they'll recognize the difference. But anecdotally, we're not hearing any of those issues. The biggest thing that was a surprise for us, we knew we could measure the absence of bad stuff and the presence of good stuff in the lab. And we knew we had all the lab tests to prove it, but we didn't know that people would feel a difference in their body until we launched. And then we started getting all these testimonials from people about they don't have jitters, they don't have nervousness, they don't have headaches when they stop coffee as well. So it wasn't an intended consequence. We didn't set about to do this. It was one of these unintended consequences that we're very happy about. But I think it's less likely. And if you do, let me know. We'll refund you completely if you have any problems with our coffee generally. I mean, that's sort of our standard. I mean, we want people to find a really good solution for their coffee. And if we're not it, keep looking.
Excellent. And Harry says, do you have any real competitors? I haven't found any real competitors for you, but maybe we won't go there. I don't know. Do you feel comfortable talking about?
Yeah, look, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is a very big market. And I think that there's plenty of room for people who are doing a really good job when it comes to coffee and health. So I actually prefer to think of them as sort of allies and less as competitors if they're doing a good job. And there's certain groups that are doing a good job. I mean, I think Bulletproof led the way in the beginning by educating people that there is a mold problem in coffee and that you should have coffee without mold. Now, I don't think they went far enough in the sense that the removal of mold is one step, and then there's lots of other things that you should care about. But if you want a mold-free coffee, that's definitely a coffee that would work for you. Although, you know, I mean, there's other things that I think matter a lot, like the organic. And antioxidants that I would say are important. And then also smaller roasters. I mean, if you can patronize your smaller roaster in your town that's making fresh coffee, just make sure that it's organic and make sure that it's specialty grade. I mean, ask them specifically that it's organic and it's specialty grade. They may not have the testing on, you know, the pesticide residue or mold testing, but if you get a very high quality coffee, then you're likely to be well set with that. Apart from that, it's so early. There's not many companies focusing on this, and I get the feeling that there's a lot of people waiting to see if consumers value health and coffee. So, you know, that wasn't sort of our criteria. Our criteria is we just wanted to create a coffee that was really good for your health. And it wasn't a business first. And then, you know, we came up with, you know, there wasn't a financial incentive at the beginning, and then the business came as a result of that. But I think other companies, no doubt, will jump in the game as they start seeing that people will buy coffee based on health, and they care about buying coffee based on health. And that's only going to be good for the market. But more importantly, why this really matters is this is going to be very good for the farmers. That, you know, one of the knock-on effects of people starting to buy great quality organic coffee is obviously less pesticides, better for the farmers, and the farmers are going to get paid a real compensation for high quality coffee. So it's a virtuous circle. Everybody wins. The consumer wins in terms of their health, and the farmer wins in terms of getting a fair amount of money for their product when they're doing a good job. Because things like fair trade and that sort of thing, while they're well-intentioned, they're not really going to help the farmer out that much. It's just such a low bar. It's such a small amount of money extra to give them in order to compensate them. But when individuals start buying coffee based on the quality of the coffee, then they'll pay more for it, and the farmers will do better. So.
Thank you for explaining that. That was great. Yeah, it's important. It's good for our environment too. I mean, it's just a win-win-win-win-win all the way around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then Harry's second part to his question is, can you discuss your subscription options?
That's a really good question. I don't honestly, I mean, I know we have two, I think we try and make it as flexible as we possibly can. I mean, you're not tied in. You can just, buy one bag of coffee, or you can go from one bag of coffee to buying a prepaid coffee subscription for a year. There's financial incentives all the way, depending on how much that you want to commit, but it's very, very flexible. So you can change the pace of your subscription, so it's every 2 weeks or every month. But we just try and make it very easy, and we try and make it very easy for you to buy and very easy for you to leave if you choose to. We're not about trying to tie people in, you know, so the subscriptions are in line with that.
Yeah, it's always a fun day when the beautiful boxed purity coffee arrives in the mail. Yeah, you guys do a good job of your packaging and just the whole look of the coffee. Yeah, it's great. You've thought of so many different aspects to make it appealing.
That first smell is incredible, isn't it? When you open that bag for the first time, it's
even when you open the box.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed. And Shelley says, any recommendations for coffee makers to use with your brand?
You know, this is one of these things that we've looked at every step of the production chain about what things could affect the health benefits of the coffee that you consume. And the final thing is actually the coffee machine, or the way you prepare the coffee. But because people prepare coffees in so many different ways and it's personal taste, well, we sort of recommend, like, if you want the highest amount of antioxidants in the coffee, an espresso is a fantastic way because it's under pressure to prepare coffee. If you want a coffee that has more diterpenes in it, which is cafestol and caviol, you want a French press because a paper filter traps those compounds in the coffee, and they have benefits when it comes to heart and to liver. So the long answer to that question is, we don't fall in any one way or another. I mean, I personally just use a pour over, a Chemex, a coffee filter, and in the morning in my first pot of coffee is with a Breville. I grind, a pot of coffee, the coffee for a pot of coffee, and it sits there in a sort of a carafe. And that's it. It's not very sophisticated. It's not very complicated. It's just, good coffee, in an easy way.
Yeah, that's great. I use a stainless steel coffee press,
Yeah.
and I know they have a lot of glass, but those tend to break if you're
Yeah.
not really careful. So I love my stainless steel. You can get it in various sizes, and I feel like I'm getting more of those nutrients in the coffee than straining it through
That's right.
paper. And you got to really make sure that the paper isn't bleached. And I just think check to see if there's plastic being heated in any step of your coffee making process, because we know that that is not ideal. And Dr. Tom will literally walk up to people at conferences if they have the plastic lid on their hot drink, and he just removes it and says, that was for your health. And because that heat rises up, hits that plastic, and then BPA comes down into your coffee. So there's other ways that we can bring toxins in to our coffee, even if we have the purest beans.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of toxicity with plastic. So just check and just pay attention to if the coffee that you're brewing in the morning comes in contact with plastic that's heated.
Yeah.
I think that's a good rule of thumb. Okay, great. And then any options for a Keurig? Do you still have the Keurig cups, or the cups available?
Yeah, and we're phasing them out. Our issue was this, that there's not many dilemmas. There hasn't been many dilemmas in this business, in the sense that every decision based on health and no compromise. But K-cups was one dilemma. Like, it was easy to pick whether it should be organic or treated with pesticides, fresh or stale, moldy or clean. I mean, all of these decisions are very easy, and the way that the coffee is roasted was very easy in terms of roasting it for the most antioxidants. The challenge came with K-cups, because we know that K-cups typically have very substandard coffee, very poor quality coffee. We know that about 40% of the US drinks their coffee from K-cups. So that was the challenge. Do we provide a really good quality coffee in the best quality K-cup we can, or do we just say, no, we're not going to do it? And so ultimately we said, our mission is better health through coffee. And if it's better health through coffee, then we're going to provide this way. If your alternative was another K-cup. Reason for the long explanation is we're just coming out with a thing called Pocket Purity, which is a sachet of our coffee, ground but nitrogen flush, so it's still fresh, and it's like a tea bag. It's a pour over, so that you can put it in your cup. There's no plastics. It's a great pour over coffee, and it's our sort of solution to the single serve, and that's going to be coming out in about 2 weeks. So depending on how the reaction is to that, my goal is to start phasing out K-cups, so that once we've given our consumers a safer, better alternative to K-cups.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I got one of those at a conference, and I thought, how is this going to work?
Yeah.
How can you make coffee like tea? And it was delicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really surprisingly delicious. So well done on coming up with that. I don't know if any other companies are doing that, but I thought this is really clever.
Yeah.
But I waited until after I tasted it, because I'm like, I wonder how this is going to be. But
Yeah.
delicious.
Yeah. It's the biggest, I'd say, complaint, but the thing we hear the most often is that we ruin people for other coffee. That, once they've tried our coffee, they're like, okay, now I can't drink Starbucks or Peet's, or I can't just get a coffee in a hotel. And so this was actually sort of a pressing need with our consumers, that they wanted to find a way to take purity on the road. So when they're traveling, or going to the office, they'd have a solution, but that didn't involve having a particular machine, or having an espresso machine or a K-cup machine, or some other method they needed to have in that hotel. So this has been a really good solution. We're excited about it.
Even my tiny stainless steel French press is pretty heavy in a suitcase to
Yeah,
travel with. And I have traveled with it many times. So it'll
yeah.
be nice. I keep checking the website to see if they're available yet, because at conferences they said it's coming, but you can just sample them right now.
We stopped it. We felt like, we were literally going to launch on Paddy's Day, and if you remember, that was just when everything went off with COVID-19, and we thought that this is just tone deaf. I mean, we're not going to be giving people something whether they can travel with it. And so what we've done in the interim is we've given this all of the launch material that we were going to launch with in that period. We've given it away to hospitals and to firefighters and to police and that sort of thing. So we've given it to first responders, and that's been really good about building up interest in the product and actually contributing to people that are really doing a fantastic job for us. And now we're ready. We'll be launching in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, thank you. You guys did free shipping there for a little bit. So you were really conscious in this whole COVID time, to be really thoughtful of the consumer, which I appreciate. And I always enjoy your Instagram page where you're the pictures with the first responders, or you're sharing the coffee. So they should be drinking the best coffee available
Well,
for sure.
I mean, it really is thanks to our customers, because we did a matching campaign. So every new customer who bought a bag of coffee, we would match it with another bag of coffee going to the front lines. And I think we've given away more than 3 tons of coffee so far. So it's been great, very well received. But I mean, the consumers really stepped up, and we bought a lot of coffee, and we were able to give away a lot of coffee, which was fantastic.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Very generous. I love Karen's question. She says, can you describe your favorite atmosphere for drinking a cup of coffee? Mine is on the patio with a light snow.
That's great. I have to say, my wife and I have a thing called the Purity Huddle. And so every morning we get up about 6 o'clock. First thing we do is I make coffee, and by about 6:20, we sit on the couch and we talk about our day. We've been doing that for years, and that is probably the nicest time of the day for me, when it hasn't got crazy yet. We're sitting back and relaxing. We have our first cup of coffee, and so I'd say the Purity Huddle is my favorite.
That's wonderful. Yes, purity coffee with companions is always really nice. So that has to be a special time for you guys.
Yeah.
And Laura says, I see your link posted on Facebook. I can't wait to try it. So Laura, we can't wait to hear your thoughts. So post them on this Facebook Live, or go to social media for Purity Coffee and let them know. So we're anxious to hear. And you guys now have different roast, right? It was just one roast, and now there's a dark roast.
Yeah. So our focus as a company is it's not, a lot of coffee companies, you go there and there's 40 different coffees and they want to give variety and that sort of thing. Our focus has been, we wanted to find the very best coffee for your health. So, we lab test all this coffee, pick the ones that are highest in antioxidants, and we create a blend with that coffee so we can dial up certain compounds, creating different roasts inside. So there's 3 coffees inside our standard coffee. They're roasted at slightly different degrees because we're looking for different compounds. The reason I say all that is that we discovered about a year and a half ago that there's a certain compound that's only available in darker roasts, which is very valuable for gut health and the blood-brain barrier in terms of Alzheimer, dementia, and that sort of thing. There's just been very impressive studies on that. And the only way to do that was to take, it's a thing called chlorogenic lactones. And chlorogenic lactones come from chlorogenic acids. So get a coffee very high in chlorogenic acid, and then roast it darker than you would normally, but before a thing called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons develop, which you get from any burnt food. So there's a sweet spot. But anyway, long story, we did that so that we could create a different benefit to our coffee, and at the same time, then customers have a choice. But we're never going to be the coffee company that has 20 different coffees. We make every decision based on health, and that was the reason for the dark roast.
Thank you for explaining that and doing the research on that, so that we can just swoop in and enjoy drinking it without having to understand all that. But yes, it's definitely not good to burn food and create ages and all that. So thank you for being conscious, and lots of people like that dark roast, that richer flavor. So, and I have a lot of respect for companies that focus on a few things and do them well, right? Instead of trying to be the best at everything.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we feel strongly that that coffee is so good for you that people should pay attention to it, and it's such a deep subject. Like we've been approached by a lot of companies to add things to the coffee, and and just our focus is we want to do one thing very, very well. We want to give people will add different things to their coffee, and they should, and that's it's all personal taste and what they'd like to have more of in their bodies. But we're just going to concentrate on making the very best quality coffee we can for health.
Yeah. And that's the beauty at conferences. Like we just get to enjoy it black,
Yeah.
and everybody loves it. And I think a lot of people who aren't drinking it black get to really realize how delicious black coffee can be and that you really don't need additives. Um, and Jillian, this is going to be our last question. I can't believe how quickly an hour flies by, but we try to keep these at about an hour. But Jillian's comment is, I have 1 cup of coffee in the morning and it's like my sacred time and space. It's my form of meditation, which I think is really a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah.
There's so many different forms of meditation, but I just feel like anything that we consume, we should do with joy and gratitude, right?
I think the process of making coffee is a meditation for me as well. I mean, just, grinding the beans and smelling it and just, and heating the water and getting the right temperature and that for a pour over. I mean, that whole process is a little bit, ritual is very important, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's obvious that this is your passion and that you do it well. So thank you so much. And thank you for spending this time with all of us. And on behalf of Dr. Tom, thank you to everyone for being here, and we'll see you next week. Have a great, healthy, safe time.
Thanks.